All right, so here we're going to start in on a discussion of when not to use Linux, the serious edition. So, what do you guys say are? Give me just a couple reasons for times when you do not use Linux. Let me know what your guys' thoughts are. And sorry, Salbu, who
Um,
hasn't used anything but
yeah,
Linux for years. But
I haven't had the need to use anything else since 2008, and so I'm not sure I'm counting. But in my honest opinion is there is no reason to not use Linux. The only exception are those who are really are avid gamers and don't care what they are using. Then they really don't have a reason to use Linux.
okay, yeah, gaming. There's an application. Ivan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'd have to go right along with that, and I've got a great example for it. It's like the one game that I do happen to play, which is happen to be from Blizzard. It's World of Warcraft, but I've been doing that since '07, and their setup is not Linux friendly at all because you have to have like their Battle.net app, and then you run that, and you actually launch it from there. So it separates it all out. So if you try running just the game in a Linux environment, it's going to look for that app and you're not going to find it. I've tried to get it running using Wine, using Play on Linux, and it's just not working.
Yeah.
So there's some instances for gaming that I've seen, that one game for me, but for somebody else that would be for other type games, AAA games, things of that sort. Some may work, some may not. Of course, some folks would just yell, "Well, just use Steam." Well, yeah, but that only goes so far because not every single one of those games are going to run on it. But it's like as far as like actually needing to use the Linux environment is that you as far as gaming goes, yeah, you're going to limit yourself, but just for average kind of stuff, the Linux environment is just fine because everything works more or less. And it's it can get screwier and screwier when you're trying to do stuff for gaming in particular. But as far as like anything else goes, I haven't really seen anything or come across anything where I would need to use it in one of the other OSs, Windows or Mac. I mean, I haven't touched Mac at all ever in my life. After Apple went kaput, the Apple II in particular. After that happened, I'm just like, and then never looked back because I like the Apple II.
Yeah. So in my case, the ones that I look at is first, I have on board here. I have not booted them up for a long time. I have a Mac and I have a Windows computer on board. It's just a Mac Airbook and a Surface Pro 1. That thing might be like a collector's edition at this point in time. And in the event a client's like, I really can't get something to work, and it's like, all right, you're going to make me pull this out. I will pull out the old Windows computer and go ahead and start working on that and just look at that just to testing. So for me, client testing is really the one case that I personally do. And, it doesn't really happen much because I have not booted them up for, probably, I think I booted up and charged the Surface when I was in California, and that was in December. The Mac, I think I charged it once since then. I think I booted it once since then as well, just to see if it had charge, I think. Or I think I needed a computer that would boot really super fast or something. I don't know. I can't remember, but that was the case. So for me, those are the things. Now, other things that I've heard talked about, of course, we already talked about gaming. If you happen to work at a company that requires you to use Linux or Windows or Mac or something, yeah, well, you're kind of out of luck there too. So, those are instances when you do not use Linux as well. What I try to steer away from is people that are saying, I have to use X software. Well, why do you have to use that software? If there's a specific work reason, it has to be exactly that software, fine. You're a graphic designer, you work for a company, Photoshop is the industry standard. You have to use Photoshop, and it's not going to work well on Linux. So you're going to be locked into one of the other two operating systems. But if you're talking about, well, I need to Photoshop the image quality of my family photos, it's a personal thing. No, there's plenty other options, and they do just as good of a job as Photoshop. And so there are legitimate cases when not to use Linux, but they're kind of rarities. Anything else we want to add on the serious end here as to when you may not want to use Linux?
Yeah, I actually came across one. I mean, it's like in my old job, I was quality assurance, stuff like that. And they were Windows. Everything was Windows.
Mhm.
And there was a point where in the past, I mean, we're going back years, where because they were actually at one point two companies, and one used Windows and the other used Mac. And so for a while there, when the two were put together, we had both systems for a period. One was called red, one was called blue. Yeah.
Go figure.
Or no, not red, maroon. We call it maroon and blue. And and then we got rid of the blue system, which was the Mac system, and just went with Windows. And everything we did was Windows based. I remember using MKS, for what I was doing, and Toad and a few other things and stuff like that. And they only used the Windows versions of it. And I asked the desktop guys, "Hey, why have we thought about using a Linux desktop or something?" And they're like, "No, why?" Yeah, and I'm just like, okay. And so I started getting curious about the Linux desktop for home, and lo and behold, I'm LMDE later.
Yeah, and it works well.
Yeah, very
Works
well.
just as good as everything else, and it doesn't spy on you and take over and control your system and give you ads in the start menu.
Bingo.
Lord help us. So there we have it. Salbu, any other things you thought of on the way of serious reasons not to use Linux?
The only reason could be if there is some type of application that in a business environment for when you use some kind of program that doesn't have a Linux variant that does the same job. And I think it's quite rare because those businesses who really want to use Linux, if the software doesn't exist, they will create one.
Yeah, and the like when I was still doing cancer research in the lab, this was right when Vista was in the process of coming out. We spent I think it was like $15,000 or $20,000, or maybe it's $100,000. It was some insane amount on a brand new methodology. It's probably very standard now, but it was a real-time PCR machine. If you've heard of PCR, of course everybody's heard of PCR now with the Kufi tests. But PCR, you put everything in, and then you run it through a cycle, which is going to basically run your sampling through cycles. And what it does is every cycle is it doubles and amplifies the amount of compound in your sample. Well, what real-time PCR does is it does this, but at every step of the process, it does a photo analysis. So I can put in, for example, a luciferase gene, and I can measure the quantities of luciferase based on some circumstance. This is going to allow me to do point analyses of, in real time, how different pharmaceuticals are going to work. So these are the applications that I did in my dissertation. So we're running this machine. We pay this obscene amount of money for it right when Vista's coming out. Well, the software only worked on Windows like XP, And so you get a case like that where you get all of the very, very, very specific software built in. That is certainly a legit case. And it's certainly one that is worth keeping in mind. So, yeah, those are some of the really good examples that we might have. So there is our serious end of our things. There are legitimate times when not to use Linux. Thank you for watching this video from Switched to Linux. This channel would not be possible without the backing of the program supporters scrolling on the screen now. You can be a supporter at Patreon at patreon.com/TOMM or at thinklifemedia.com. I also want to thank the open source community who creates such excellent software that makes producing this show possible. Please remember to support your software communities. Thank you, and I hope that you enjoy switching to Linux.